Hello, and welcome to a special State of the Union episode of the Republican Rundown. My name is Tommy Pigott. I'm here with Anna Kelly and Matt Middleton. First, I'd like to say congratulations to President Trump on becoming the presumptive Republican nominee for president. Now, as we have the presumptive nominee for president on the Republican side, assumingly so, Joe Biden on the Democrat side, with the State of the Union, Joe Biden's looking to reset, that's their word, his failing campaign. But I think if you look at the issues, there's not really much to reset because he's a disaster across the board. So I wanted to get your opinion on some of these issues, starting with the border. And we have a clip on Joe Biden on the border at the beginning of his administration, if we could play that.
It happens every single solitary year. There is a significant increase in the number of people coming to the border in the winter months of January, February, March. It happens every year.
So it happens every single solitary year. Now, Matt, your research team puts out a piece every single month when we have these border numbers come out. What's your response to that Joe Biden excuse from the beginning of his administration claiming that this whole crisis was seasonal?
Yeah, I think there's nothing new to immigration, right? I mean, we've been dealing with immigration for a long time. But the problem is the crisis under Joe Biden, we've seen 35 straight months of immigration numbers over 150,000, right? That was a number never reached under the Trump administration. So now we're dealing with a crisis at our border. We're dealing with a crisis in border states and all of the other 50 states that are having to deal with this influx of immigration.
So, Anna, when you hear him say it's seasonal, Karine Jean-Pierre said it ebbs and flows a few months ago. I mean, do you think the American people are buying this seasonal sort of excuse from Joe Biden that he's had from the beginning?
Absolutely not. And it's no wonder he wants to reset. I mean, I want to say he's claimed he's going to reset every single State of the Union he's had so far because every single year has been a disaster. And what's really interesting about that clip, I mean, like you said, it was the beginning of his administration. I mean, Biden and Democrats and his whole administration are absolutely clueless because, I mean, he's claiming that this is seasonal. Of course, we know that's not true. He continues to break record after record every single month. I believe we're at the most immigrant encounters in history, right? I know Matt can speak better to that. But despite his claims, I mean, he continued to make, I want to say, 94 executive actions in his first 100 days. So while he's making these absolutely delusional claims, he's continuing to put forward policies that open the border. I know that when that first massive migrant caravan came through, they were saying, "Thank you, Joe Biden." So we all know why these open border policies and this crisis is happening. It's because of Joe Biden and the policies that he's put forward since day one.
Yeah, and Matt, to what Anna was talking about, those executive actions, Mayorkas bragged that they had reversed so many Trump policies that it would take too long for him to describe them during an interview on MSNBC. So they clearly were proud of these policies when they were implementing them.
Promises made, promises kept. This administration set out at the very beginning on an open border policy agenda. Since Biden took office, there have been over 9 million illegal border crossings. That includes 7.2 million that have been encountered and apprehended, as well as 1.8 million known gotaways. And that number could be vastly undercounted to even what we know.
Yeah, and I think that it's the gotaways number to me, and at least when I'm looking at this, that obviously the 7.2 million is overwhelming communities with them being released, but it's that 1.8 million that I think keeps a lot of law enforcement officials up at night. You had the FBI saying that the terror threat in the United States is at the highest point since 9/11 because of the border crisis. And 1.8 million people crossing the border. We have no idea who they are, except for the fact that they wanted to evade law enforcement. That can't be good for our security.
Absolutely not. I mean, we had, over 150 folks on the terror watch list that were apprehended at our border, right? And when we look at that, over 1 million gotaways, how many of those folks were also on the terror watch list? So there's all these unvetted migrants coming in. We have no idea what their intentions are coming into our country. And then I know we talked about last week about the fact that only 5 to 10% of the fentanyl that is coming across is being apprehended. So, I mean, we only have just a small picture of what's actually going on in it, and it could be even worse. It's really concerning.
Yes, I think it's one of the most serious, if not the most serious, threat to the homeland that we face as a country, this border crisis. One of the ways that he could reset this border crisis, though, would be reversing those executive actions. But when asked why he won't, this was a recent comment that Joe Biden made, if we could play that clip.
With executive authority, or is there more you could do absent
That's not all I can do. Just give me the power. I've asked for the very day I got in office. Give me the border patrol. Give me the people, the judges. Give me the people who can stop this and make it work for us.
So sort of two parts to that, I think. One is saying that he doesn't have the power to institute any executive orders right now, and the second part is talking about that amnesty bill he put forward his first day in office. Matt, I hope you could describe, kind of react to the idea that he doesn't have the power right now to take any executive action on this crisis.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on that, I mean, he sung a very different tune when he came into office with 94 executive orders in the first 100 days. So the idea that he doesn't have the power to address this crisis is just patently absurd. And when we're talking about fentanyl and all the fentanyl that has crossed the border, I think a stat that kind of goes underappreciated is the fact that just by pure tonnage, the amount of fentanyl that has crossed the border that we know of is enough to kill every American 37 times over. That's
just an incredibly serious statistic. I mean, it's hard to fathom how much that is and how serious of a crisis this is. I do think, and also the second part of that when he's talking about the bill that he put forward his first day in office, his amnesty bill, if he was serious on legislation, there is legislation on the table. We've talked about this before, the House legislation that passed. So, we don't need this amnesty bill that's going to make the crisis worse that he put forward the first day in office. He should pass H.R. 2.
Yeah, I mean, he's the president of the United States. I mean, we know he put forward those 94 executive actions in his first 100 days. And all it would take would be for him to call up Chuck Schumer and tell him to consider the Secure the Border Act. The House Republican majority put forward that bill and passed that bill a year ago. That was the most comprehensive border security bill in history. It's not that hard. He's the president of the United States. And like you said, if he really wanted to take action, he should call up Chuck Schumer today and get this rectified.
Yeah, I think the idea that he could reverse these executive orders today, he could pass that legislation or at least end his obstruction of that legislation today, shows that he could solve this crisis anytime he wants to. He's choosing not to. He's purposefully choosing not to. So, Matt, just to kind of put a finer point on it, does he have the power to reverse the executive actions that he took in the first place when he first came into office and since then?
Absolutely. And I think it's really honestly as simple as that. I mean, absolutely he has the power. And truly it's just a matter of whether or not he has the prerogative to do it. And it doesn't seem like that's the case.
Well, yeah, obviously not since he's refusing to. It's like, how many excuses can he possibly have for not solving this crisis? It's really a real dereliction of duty. It's not just on the border, though, that he's trying to reset the narrative on this. It's also on the economy. One of the main issues is inflation. I think one of the finer points on inflation that he can't really run away from is how often he changes his excuse for inflation. Just want to remind people watching what Biden first said about inflation, if we have that clip.
We also know that as our economy has come roaring back, we've seen some price increases. Some folks have raised worries that this could be a sign of persistent inflation, but that's not our view. Our experts believe, and the data shows, that most of the price increases we've seen were expected and are expected to be temporary.
So, Anna, one of the things I think a big takeaway from that is that the price increases were expected. He almost got at the truth there in the fact that he was warned when he passed the legislation that he passed the $1.9 trillion in March 2021. When he passed that legislation, it would lead to inflation. And he was warned by liberal economists. Right. So he almost accidentally got at the truth there when saying these price increases were expected.
That's right. I mean, it's funny when he touts the experts, right? Because all of the experts were saying that the Biden inflation tax scam, all of these budget proposals he was putting forward that included more tax hikes, more wasteful spending, would all prompt more inflation. I mean, you had the Tax Foundation, Penn Wharton School, Moody's, Congressional Budget Office, which is a nonpartisan entity, all warning him that all of these policies would cause more inflation. I mean, it's a lot similar to the border video. I mean, at the beginning, he's just casting blame, pointing fingers, and then simultaneously pushing forward these policies that make life worse for everyday Americans.
And saying that they were expected, it's almost like he's saying they were on purpose as well, which I think is sort of a weird excuse for him to put forward. He can't really run away from lying about that, though. And when you look at the second part of that, or one of the points he was making, that they would be temporary. This, Matt, another area where your research team puts out every month when we have the Consumer Price Index report comes out, you put out new stats and statistics on this. I was hoping you could contextualize the price increases we have seen under Joe Biden and whether you can accurately describe them as temporary.
Yeah, I think every American knows that these prices are not temporary. Biden has presided over the highest inflation in 40 years and still double the rate of when he took office. He's trying now to take credit for the decrease in inflation as a percentage. But prices as a whole have risen 17.9% since Biden took office. And it's even higher when you break it out among individual things. So food prices are up 21%. Rent is up 19.4%. Electricity is up 28.6%. These are all costs that are hitting Americans' bottom lines and affecting middle-income families at a time when they really can't afford those costs.
And I think one of the important parts about the price increases and the inflation is that the inflation we're seeing is already on top of that 40-year inflation. So when he says that the price increases were going to be temporary, prices aren't going down. So by definition, these prices are here to stay, right? So for him to say that they're temporary is completely out of touch with what the American family is actually feeling right now.
Exactly, and I love when, Matt, you break down all of the different ways that families are experiencing this, because like we say every week, every time that Americans go to the gas pump, every time they go to the grocery store, every time they pay their electric bill, they're feeling the impact of these policies, right? I mean, we're still at twice the rate of year-over-year inflation than when President Trump is in office. So yeah, I mean, it's absolutely ignorant and delusional to continue to lie to the American people when they're facing this every single day.
Yeah, and I think the comparison there between Trump and Biden is such a powerful one, where you had the best economy arguably in modern history. You had real wages rising for workers at the fastest pace they had in decades. You had low inflation. You had job creation. Across the board, people feeling better about the economy. And now Joe Biden, only 13% of Americans saying that Bidenomics has helped them. What a contrast between those two. On the wages point, I think this is part of the problem he's having with the resetting narrative he's trying to put forward, because he actually is claiming that his policies have worked. So far from resetting, he's doubling down on them. And there's two false claims he keeps on making on jobs and wages, if we could play that clip.
All told, we've created 14 million jobs since he took office, more than any president has created in all 4 years of a term. Wages are up more than inflation.
So jobs and wages. Matt, I was hoping you could touch on the jobs front first. I know this is one of the statistics that your team has delved into and has fact-checked Biden on this before, that claim that they've created 14 million new jobs.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a key distinction between what Biden likes to claim is a job created and a job recovered. Obviously, a job created would be a new job that didn't exist before the pandemic. Biden has been touting jobs recovered, and part of this statistic that's 15 million or 14 million or however he decides to frame it. But the reality is it's quite different. So during Trump's first 37 months in office, there was a net 6.4 million new jobs created. Now, under President Biden, 5.4 million jobs have been created. So obviously, 1 million less jobs have actually been created under this president than President Trump's economy.
So, Anna, to me, that's astonishing that he's talking about job creation then, when in reality, if you compare those time periods, Trump actually has a much better record than Joe Biden when it comes to job creation.
That's right, and we still have a historic amount of Americans who are still sitting on the sidelines from COVID. So what about those folks who are still not able to re-enter the job market? I mean, real wages are down. We know that he's lying to the American people, and once again, like we've said time and time again, they see that. They know that they're bringing home maybe the same amount that they were bringing in 4 years ago, but the purchasing power is so much less because of his inflation policies. So again, I don't understand how he can continue to go up and lie to the American people when they're facing this reality every day.
Yeah, and Matt, on that real wages point, it's not like these are statistics that are hidden somewhere. These are published by the government. There are facts and figures where you can look at the real wage numbers and you can actually see whether real wages are down or up from when he took office. Right? That's not up for dispute. Real wages are down since Joe Biden took office.
No, these are very simple statistics to fact check, right? So real wages in comparison to inflation are down 2%, right? So, and what that means for the average median income household is $3,600 less per pay period, or per year, I should say. So yeah, I mean, these are easily fact-checkable statistics that the Biden administration is choosing not to tout tonight.
And I think it's also incredible that this job creation myth that he's putting forward, the wages point, it's not like he said this once by accident. This is something he's been saying for months now, and it's just not accurate.
Yeah, it raises a lot of questions, right? I mean, I know we've talked about his cognitive decline a number of times. So is he just being fed false information by his handlers? Is he absolutely ignorant to what is going on? Or is he lying to the American people? None of those options are good. But I think we'll see more of that tonight, just more and more of the same lies to the American people, despite the fact that they see what's happening right in front of them.
And I think another part of that completely misconstruing statistics comes with the deficit and the debt. This is another area where Biden has continued pushing a myth. If we could play Biden's claims on the deficit.
We cut the deficit by doing all this by $1 trillion so far.
So real quick on this before we move on to other issues, Matt, is the deficit, or has Biden's policies cut the deficit?
Absolutely not. So Biden's policies have actually led to at least $11 trillion worth of new spending. And if you break that out across all American households, what that means for each American family, it's an additional $83,000 in debt.
Wow, I mean, that's an astonishing number. And it's debt that Biden clearly has no interest in changing his trajectory because he's bragging about it astonishingly, even though he's increasing that deficit. Another sort of related area to this, in terms of prices, we talked about the price increases for food, for rent, is energy. And I think one of the problems he has for the reset as well is that the energy policy was, a war on American energy was the policy of his administration. And to prove that, we have one of many clips from Joe Biden talking about oil drilling.
No more drilling. There is no more drilling. I haven't formed any new drilling.
So no new drilling. Anna, that seems to me to be cause and effect. We're paying outrageously high energy prices because of Biden's war on American energy.
Exactly. I mean, day one, he canceled construction of the Keystone Pipeline. That didn't just affect jobs directly where the pipeline was running through either. I spent a lot of time in Wisconsin. Even folks in Wisconsin were affected. I mean, we had companies where they had to lay off over 1,000 workers because of halting that construction. So, I mean, we see the cause and effect. You're exactly right. I mean, he halted the energy production. We're seeing gas prices go up. We're seeing American lose blue-collar jobs, which, by the way, a lot of those blue-collar workers are folks that maybe traditionally supported these blue-collar Democrat policies, and now they feel like folks like President Biden have let them behind. So, I mean, there's a lot at play here, and we're seeing the really disastrous results of those policies.
And I think it's also clear that Biden doesn't care about that. I mean, that we have a clip from Jennifer Granholm here, which I think purposefully shows the Biden administration's attitude towards these higher prices. If we could play that clip from Jennifer Granholm.
In Sturgis, Michigan, it is $2.89 a gallon. I guess that's better than in California. What is the Granholm plan to increase oil production in America?
Oh my God. That is hilarious. Would that I had the magic wand on this. As you know, of course, oil is a global market. It is controlled by a cartel. That cartel is called OPEC, and they made a decision yesterday that they were not going to increase beyond what they were already planning.
Quite the reaction there. I don't think she could have laughed any harder. Kind of bizarre, to be honest with you. Biden's also laughed at high prices at different occasions when it's brought up to him. Matt, what's your reaction to Jennifer Granholm just completely?
I mean, what a great couple of clips. I mean, if you're looking to get into the mind of what this administration is looking for, I mean, they make it very clear. And again, I think it gets back to the promises made, promises kept. Like, this is what this administration wanted from the get-go, which was less oil production, higher energy prices. I mean, the price of gas on average for every American has been over $3 for over 1,000 days. And Jennifer Granholm, talks there about OPEC and how it's a cartel. But what she doesn't mention is that Biden went out of his way to go to Saudi Arabia, has kneeled to the folks in Venezuela to try to make sure that they are producing more energy, when the reality is we could be doing that at home and we're simply not.
It seems like, to me, the best way to not rely on OPEC for energy is to produce your own energy. That seems like common sense to me, which I don't understand why they don't get that.
You'd think so. And yeah, Matt's exactly right. I mean, he's not against drilling oil. He's against unleashing American energy. Like he said, he went to a number of foreign leaders, begged them to produce more oil. At one point, we had Secretary Pete Buttigieg even toying with the idea of getting oil from Iran, which is a state sponsor of terror. So, I mean, yeah, it's absolutely absurd, the fact that he refuses to unleash American energy, refuses to support these really important blue-collar jobs that we have here in the United States that would ultimately drive down prices for American consumers. But he continues to kowtow to these foreign countries that don't have America's best interest at heart.
Yeah, so there's the economic portion of it with the prices that we've been talking about, the foreign policy aspect that we've also been talking about. I think this plays into one of the biggest lies that Biden's told, or at least the biggest misconceptions he has of himself, and that's that he's a foreign policy expert. We actually have one of the many times Biden has said this.
And I mean it sincerely. I'm supposedly an expert in foreign policy. I've known every major world leader for the past 25 years.
So I'm an expert at foreign policy, is what he says. Anna, to me, it seems like if you look at his foreign policy record, that's demonstrably not true.
Yeah, maybe the problem is the fact that all of these foreign leaders know him and the fact that they know he is weak. I mean,
that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, since Biden took office, of course, we had his totally botched Afghanistan withdrawal that left up to 9,000 Americans left behind. I mean, these foreign leaders are all watching Biden's weakness, and they're making choices because of it. And it's made not just America, but our allies less safe all across the world.
Yeah, I think if you're looking for an example of how bad Biden's reputation is on foreign policy, I don't think you have to look further than Robert Gates, who is Obama's former defense secretary, saying that Biden's been wrong on every single foreign policy issue in the last 40 years. Matt, to me, only in D.C. and only in the Democrat Party could you be wrong on every single foreign policy issue for 40 years and then call yourself an expert with a straight face.
Yeah. And Anna talks about weakness, but the problem is, it's like these are all choices, right? I mean, he has gone out of his way to say that he was proud about how the Afghanistan pullout went. Now, obviously, that was a disaster. But it's more than that, right? I mean, you talk about Israel, you talk about Ukraine and how those situations are being handled, right, in the hostages. So it really is, there are proactive decisions that are being made by this administration that are counterintuitive to the ways that really this country has been run in the past and under previous administrations.
Yeah, I think China's also a great example, downplaying the threat from China for a long time, allowing them to spy on key military installations, refusing to hold them accountable for COVID. I mean, the list of failures goes on when it comes to foreign policy. You both brought up the Afghanistan example. It's not just been one time again that he's claimed it's a success. We have a clip actually recently, or a few months ago, Biden most recently asked about how he views the Afghanistan withdrawal, if we could play that clip.
Mr. President, do you admit failure in Afghanistan? Mistakes. There was a report on Afghanistan withdrawal saying there was failure, mistakes. Do you admit there was mistakes during the withdrawal and before?
No, all the evidence is coming back there. Remember what I said about Afghanistan? I said Al-Qaeda would not be there. I said it wouldn't be there. I said we'd get help from the Taliban. What's happening now? What's going on? Read your press. I was right. Thanks.
It's that slap on the podium that always gets me when I watch that, because he's so self-righteous. I mean, he forgets what he said the entire time leading up, that it would be safe and secure withdrawal. It's not. The government wouldn't collapse. It's not. That we would have ability to monitor terrorist threats there when those are severely limited. I mean, Anna, if he wants a reset on foreign policy, how can he have a reset when he's refusing to recognize what's in front of everyone's eyes, that Afghanistan was a total disaster, and a disaster because of his decisions? Yeah,
it's an absolute disgrace. I think all Americans would appreciate him owning up to his failures in Afghanistan, and the fact that our commander-in-chief is doubling down on his decisions that resulted in, like we said, almost 9,000 Americans left behind. It's absolutely disgraceful, and it's a shame, and it tells you what another 4 years could look like. I mean, with all this chaos going on around the world, would there be other situations where there would be Americans left behind? It's incredibly concerning.
And the same people that made those decisions in Afghanistan are still in charge. There's been no accountability. It's the exact same team. It's the same mistakes over and over and over again because they refuse to learn any of them. And Matt, to me, that's actually the biggest thing or takeaway when we look forward to, like Anna's talking about future crises. It's the same people that are there making these decisions, and they think they did everything right. That's got to be an alarm for every American.
Yeah, well, and especially the families of the 13 service members who died, right? I mean, they're still looking for answers. They're looking for accountability, and there hasn't been any. And it doesn't seem like at this point there is going to be any unless there's a new administration.
Yeah, I think the fact that the State of the Union after that attack, he didn't mention those service members, and he said he didn't have time. That shows you the type of president Joe Biden is, and it's a complete failure of a presidency. Matt and Anna, thank you so much for breaking all this down. We'll be back next week on the Republican Rundown.